Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Imaginary Forces stream for Palm Royale, the title sequence design.
We're here to discuss process, inspiration, all the ideas behind this title sequence. We'll watch it once and then we could get into the process.
Cool.
When we started the pitch process, we kind of started with this idea of this really stellar cast. We really wanted to focus on the typography and just the lineup. We kind of reversed the order of operations in terms of storytelling. We used the cast and the typography as the lead, and whatever brought the typography to life and told a story, we kind of flipped the script a little bit.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do something that was poppy and had a little bit of, it does have a Saul Bass kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
It has this kind of, the illustration style, I would say, is actually less inspired by Saul Bass and more inspired by Milton Glaser. I kind of idolized his illustrations when I was, in art school, and finally found a reason to kind of work within that style. We came up with these little moments that really showed off the world, this universe that was super, posh, but it also had this sense of humor to it.
Yeah.
It felt like there was conflict at the same time. What we didn't want to do was turn it into this idea about a character that was kind of moving around and experiencing all these things around her. We wanted to keep it larger, where you kind of felt like you were in these moments and you were a participant. So you weren't necessarily viewing the character, but you were kind of a member in this storytelling. So all of these points of view are very close up. It's subtle, but it's a little different from a lot of title sequences which are graphic, then kind of track a character's experience. They're going through all these obstacles. And we did pitch in kind of an obstacle type of approach, where Maxine was kind of making her ways through this jungle of ideas. And he, the showrunner, loved it, but thought, it was a little more seen before.
Which I think is true. I think kind of going this direction, one, making the type front and center, like the cast names front and center, and you're kind of getting these little glimpses into like each scene is a little glimpse into a scenario from the show, but it's almost Easter eggy because you're just getting like a piece of something. You're not really putting it together watching it, but you get the feeling that you're going through the world in that way. One of the things you're juggling when you're making a title sequence is each of the names has a certain amount of frames they're allowed to be on screen. So you have to design it in a way that feels natural without it just popping on and popping off. So we started to find ways to kind of have something hit the text and it would explode on the 34th frame or the 32nd frame, however long it was meant to be. So it's finding ways to have that organically happen and be part of the story, and also allow us to make that text really part of the scene and a main character in the scene. So it was a really fun challenge.
That was the big challenge, or one of the biggest challenges, was getting everything legally approved.
Yeah.
And, I've never had more conversations with the legal department at Apple before this title sequence.
Yeah. I think that's something a lot of people don't know is you can't just have big type. Like you can't
Yeah.
have everything the same size. You can't have there's a lot of rules about what you can and can't do with type in a title sequence.
There are a lot of considerations that you have to make when using type at this scale. Everything legally has to be up for the same amount of time.
Yeah.
You have to, if there are transition moments, the transition moments have to be equal in frames for each one. This was an interesting exercise. So originally, we thought, it's Carol Burnett. She obviously has a sense of humor. We wanted the syringe to kind of land in her name, pierce the T, and replace the T with the syringe. And that's what got us our first call from the legal department.
Yeah.
We did a motion test of that, and it was super cool, and a little disappointing, but that it never made it into the final. But, I get it. Things have to be kind of completely legible.
Which is why a lot of times you see type just floating over the top of a title sequence.
Yeah.
Which can work and looks great. But if you want to really integrate it into the title sequence, it becomes not just a challenge design-wise, but also a challenge legally, how to navigate that. So you're navigating what we're allowed to do, and then you're also navigating what we're able to do, like in the scene. So it brings a lot of challenges, but I think the payoff is worth it. You end up with something really cool and different.
One of the original ideas we pitched was a vertical bar system that would slide around and rearrange itself, but it really would showcase this kind of universe that was fun and vibrant and weird and
opulent.
I thought this was a cool exploration of the universe. I was having a hard time figuring out what the storytelling would be per se, because really you're just showing scenes and connections. It doesn't really evolve or get a sense of, normalcy to chaos, but it kind of established a nice world, a nice universe of the show. But, again, for a title sequence for a minute and a half or a minute title sequence, what keeps you continuing to the very end?
Yeah, it's nice if there's an arc and it's a something tangible you really can pick up on.
This was our original attempt, and if you could see here, we had Kristen Wiig kind of as a character, and she had these obstacles, and she was kind of maneuvering around them and kind of making her way. We had some tighter shots. Love the idea of the jewelry breaking as a conceit. Just kind of, if you notice, everything in the title sequence has a little bit of like chaos assigned to it. We're not allowed to use circles.
Yeah, that was
the title.
one other constraint, which was a funny one, was just no circles allowed in the design.
Yeah. There was another prominent title sequence that was focused, circle-based title sequence. So we couldn't use circles. I don't know if you noticed in the beginning, there are diamonds and there's hexagonal shapes. And originally those are circles. It was supposed to be a golf ball.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, there's jewelry, it's hexagonal, the diamond is hexagonal. So knowing that constraint that we couldn't use circles kind of made it a more clever narrative in our beginning.
Yeah.
Because like hitting the diamond as a golf ball to me is just a twist on the idea.
And the pills going into her mouth also becomes the what do you call it? The canopies from the beach.
The canopies. Yeah.
Rather than just a circle.
It's so the umbrella, she's swallowing these umbrellas. And so it's sucking in this world.
Yeah.
Also, there was also another prominent title sequence on the same platform that had graphic people. And so we couldn't do small characters.
Oh, right. Right.
So, which at the time I was like, graphic title sequence without small characters in it? But, it turned out these limitations kind of force you to think in other ways.
Yeah.
And so we went into this kind of more macro point of view. We have like a Kristen Wiig character on the nose of the poodle. And that was the frame that I was like, she's like balancing on the nose of the poodle. Yeah. That to me was like, what a weird image. And I was a little disappointed that we never got to bring that to life. But we ended up putting the grasshopper on the nose.
Yeah, I think that looks awesome.
Yeah.
Like it ended up being, I think it's a cooler image in the end. It's much more unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we presented that first concept, and then this was the one after, and he saw this and he's like, I love that big type. And this whole direction was about the credits just being huge in the center of the frame, and all the graphics would move around the type and the story would happen there. And then we did this, and it wasn't quite working with the music. It's weird. Like if the music had a certain vibe, it felt like the stuff could just move around. If it was like do 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 do, you could move. But the music had such a different vibe, and we got the score, and the score was so beautiful, and it sounded so good that I kind of had to rethink the way it worked.
One of the other things I remember too was we had designed these at a time when we didn't know
the
length
music.
of
Yeah.
the names as well. So once we had that like one very long name, it shrunk all the text a little bit. So then the text isn't quite as big in center of frame. So then you need more trying to balance that animation around it. It just changed everything.
And then we're thinking, if the names are always in the center and you're always repeating it, like how interesting can you get with stuff around the side? So we kind of broke away and combined the two boards, and we're like, let's do the big type, but have some Z and X movement or Y and X movement.
Yeah.
And that's why that moment where we go under the water and you see the kind of buoy there, there was that idea that I wanted the letterbox to be a water line, and
that's
then
right.
then the camera moved down and you're going in under the water, and the letterbox rises up in the frame. Like, I don't know if anyone noticed it, but like the ball gets hit on the letterbox, the grasshopper lands on the letterbox. So like I was thinking of like using the television as this aquarium, that things kind of land on the floor. Eventually you have to do something else for a minute. You can't just do the same gag. This was a cool image and never got used. It was a gun, but it was done in a way where like you have to look at it to understand it's a gun and trigger. And so he really loved this idea, and I love it too. Like, because it's not like the gun pointing and firing. It's something that you have to look and find the answer. The idea of looking and finding ideas was kind of peppered throughout the approach. We always kind of had the idea of the title going from edge to edge. At some point we were like, oh, why don't we change the color for each end title card? For every episode, it would be a different color. I think in terms of the amount of work that we had to do just to get it,
Yeah.
I think we kind of didn't do that in the end. But, you know, everyone loves a little bit of variation now and then. I feel like if there's one thing that I wish we did, I wish we just changed the color of each one.
Yeah, because we did animation into that final card, so it was just would have been, I think, time allowed for a certain amount. But there are a number of versions of the title. It's subtle, but just the names are different per episode, and so there's, I think, what, four or five versions of the title card
Yeah.
with slightly different animations, slightly different titles throughout it. So I guess that's an Easter egg if you want to look for it.
Yeah.
Part of it we talked about a little bit was constraining ourselves to something that felt of the era, which is limiting the style to things that could be done optically, essentially, with a little bit of plussing up. But I would say largely it was done in After Effects, designed with Photoshop, animated in After Effects.
I did that one shot in cinema with the fingers.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
But that was-
With the fingers hitting, because it just worked better and
Yeah, it
was
was
easier
just
to
easier
achieve.
to do.
Sometimes, After Effects is great, but it can be tedious to do repetitive things where something like cinema can just bang it out in a day. But a lot of it was really about drawing reference from that old school style of animation and optical animation to bring it together, but largely was After Effects to animate.
Yeah. When people think of the 60s and 70s, you have this idea potentially of adding a patina to it, adding yellow or something that makes it feel vintage. And this show is in the era, and we wanted the title to be in the era. So to a certain extent, in order to make something feel of the time, you have to reduce your thinking to the tools and the
constraints.
thinking, to the constraint of that time period.
Yeah.
So knowing that they would have used optical effects, they would have done it with painting on film and blackout mats. I mean, if you look at like the Superman titles,
Yeah.
just the nature of that slit scan and those optical prints that they had to make and the repetitive nature of photographing each one,
Yeah.
you kind of have to go with that vibe and soak into it and
Yeah.
see how you kind of derive your design out of that.
Yeah.
we kind of did everything thinking that if we were in that time, what are the restrictions that we would have to make a title sequence? So if you notice, like, we're not doing these like major Z-spacey moves.
Yeah.
And things feel a little more kind of back and forth and horizontal and vertical, because like there was a day when you had to be a little more restrained in your kind of thinking, and you kind of really had to reduce and simplify and tell a story with very little resources.
Yeah, a lot of X and Y axis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fun because it's like you turn off a little of one part of your brain.
Yeah.
And then you activate another.
Yeah.